You're listening to Brave Girls with Tracy M, where we choose to empower you to be a better leader, mentor, and coach in the world. We'll share stories of people who have achieved great heights by overcoming adversity and rising to the challenge, all while pursuing their passions. These courageous people will inspire you to have faith in yourself and take bold action. Right here with the host of Brave Girls, Tracy M.
Episode 9, Recognize How Exceptional You Are with Jennifer Ransaw Smith. On today's episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M., I interview my good friend Jennifer Ransaw Smith, a nationally recognized expert who calls herself a personal brand architect. Leveraging her advertising agency background, she's on a mission to ignite the visibility of professional women around the globe. She runs the Undeniably Fierce community on Facebook, where she speaks about the importance of recognizing how exceptional you are. On this episode, Jennifer shares with us her manifesto, which is so inspiring and empowering. She works with her clients to define themselves before others do it for them. She shares how her days as a copywriter for the likes of Burger King, AT&T, Texaco, and Kraft helped her hone her branding chops and how she used that experience to be a mentor and coach to women. She also shares how an article in Fast Company magazine in 1997 changed the trajectory of her career and why she believes that it's possible for women to become industry rock stars and attract phenomenal opportunities like speaking engagements and paid board positions. What I love most about this interview with Jennifer is her passion for personal branding and how she equips her clients for success by using her talents and gifts. You'll love her story about her leap into entrepreneurship right in the middle of a recession and how she has grown her practice to include international clients and female professionals in so many sectors. She shares her perspective on fear and how to master your mindset and then develop soft skills to navigate your success. I share how Jennifer helped launch my teaching and speaking career over a decade ago and why investing in myself by working with her made all the difference to my work in the world today. Jennifer gives some sound advice that she shares with her clients as they work to elevate their personal brands, and I know you'll be able to take that away. We talk about the importance of building our relationships, having self-confidence, and why you need to take the reins as opposed to pledging undying loyalty to your organization. As Jennifer Ransaw Smith points out on the show, it's important to recognize how exceptional you are. I hope you enjoy this episode.
So welcome to Brave Girls with Tracy M. Today I have Jennifer Ransaw Smith with me, and we are going to dive deep into personal branding and all things being an industry rock star and what that means. So welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here. Congratulations on the show. Love the name, and I think that we're about to have a really good time.
Yes, we are. We are. So just a little bit about you. So our audience knows you're a nationally recognized personal elevation architect, leadership development mentor, and personal brand strategist. And what I love about you, Jennifer, is that you have this full-on training in all things marketing, communications, and branding that you did back in the day, as you've worked at many high-profile agencies from LA to New York, elevating the brands of these really, really big consumer brands like Burger King, AT&T, Kraft, Texaco, Clerical, Coke, Redline, like the list just goes on. And so tell us a little bit about your backstory and kind of how you came to do the work that you're doing today.
Excellent. Yeah, as you said, my background started as a copywriter, and as most copywriters, you kind of hone your skills on Madison Avenue. And so I'm originally from Los Angeles, but the dream was to get to Madison Avenue. And so I was working in New York, writing for big brands, big commercials, radio, television, and print. I was doing the little Kool-Aid commercials that you would, the jingles that you would watch during your sitcoms during the day. And walked in my creative director's office, and he had a book, a magazine actually, that I had never heard of at the time, but now that has come quite familiar, called Fast Company. And the head cover story was 1997, the brand called you. And that was the first time that anyone ever had written about personal branding. So it wasn't an industry. It was just a concept, an article that Tom Peters came out with. And it just resonated with me so much because I could remember and start thinking about, as he was outlining how we needed to start owning how we were presenting ourselves. I was simultaneously doing the same thing for companies, but I started paying attention to how we had people who were within our organization who were tremendously skilled at it, and how you could have two copywriters or two, publicists, and how one person's making $50,000 more and they're doing the same thing. And it was something that did not go away. And so what I did was, I didn't know that it would transform my life to the degree that it did. A decade later, I ended up leaving the industry and starting my own thing. But what it did was it whet my palate. And so the moment Robin Roper Fisher came out with, Make a Name for Yourself in 2001, I was just at the bookstore. The moment, Radical Careering by Sally Hogshead, any kind of book, and then slowly workshops and things like that. But like I said, it wasn't an industry, so it was, us piecemealing what it actually meant. But I, looking back, what I think happened was I realized that my gifts and my talents were better suited helping people equip themselves for success, because there's, the corridors are overflowing with people who are doing that for the big brands. So. Right.
And you were probably a little bit ahead of your time as you kind of saw what was potential out there, because it really, especially for women, I think, we're all about get the next certificate, get the next degree, work more hours to prove yourself, and hope and wish and dream that someone sees you in a certain light. And so I know you're all about igniting the visibility of professional women out there and really helping them develop their brand, understand what their brand is, showcase all the expertise that they may have in their industry, and then, make a name for themselves in their entire industry, not just their particular company or organization, so that then they can attract opportunities. So why don't you speak to that?
Absolutely, but I just want to dial back 1 second to piggyback when you're talking about being ahead of the curve. I think it really resonates with the title of this, with the podcast, because the fact of the matter is we had a conversation recently. My former boss, when I was on Capitol Hill, she would say, Jennifer, we have clients that are paying you, you have to go do the client work. But I was sitting in her office every day talking about personal branding. She's like, I don't even know what the hell that is, like you're trying to bring in speaker series and you're trying to bring in a library and you're trying to do these newsletters. And I had all these direct reports and I'm like, putting plans together for all my direct reports. And she's like, we have clients that are, and my husband, when I came home and quit, he was like, I don't know what the hell this is. When I married you, I married a corporate woman. I did not marry an entrepreneur,
Right.
And so, when you talk about, I never even considered the word brave, and I wouldn't necessarily, just looking back, I was walking into something when nobody knew what the hell it was. And it was every fiber of my being knew that, I did not want to answer the phone calls anymore with the clients, But as soon as my direct reports came and sat down and said, I have a problem, I'm like helping them with the strategy, and that's the highlight of my day. And I'm driving home and I should have told them this, and then we're going to do this. I'm going to give them 5 books. And I remember one day deciding to send and we had offices around the country, deciding to push send on a company-wide newsletter that I devised myself, had nothing to do with my department. But what I did was I went and I looked at every podcast, I looked at every recent article that was relevant to our industry, and I designed it. I wouldn't say it was designed, but I put it together and I sent it to everyone, including the president of the company. And then every single week I would, send it to everyone, because I felt like everyone needed to keep their finger on the pulse of what was going on industry-wide. And then one week I didn't send it, and the CEO of the company happened to be down, and he put his head in my office and said, I just want to let you know that you didn't send your thing this week, and I'm looking for it, But I was like, it hit my gut when I did it. I was so scared, but I just knew, when you're sitting there and you're in your office and you're you have work to do and you're surfing the net, the net, you're like,
Yeah.
you're looking at this, you're looking at articles, you're doing personal development, you're doing everything but what you're being paid to do. And so that's what ended up happening. So when you talk about being on the forefront, it was difficult for me because it wasn't even an industry, and then to leave an industry, and I did not have the support at home. And, everyone else was like, you left a great paying job. And so then you're walking out and you're talking about, let's go talk about building your brand.
They're like, she's lost her mind.
They're like, doctors and lawyers, they're like, why the hell do I even need a brand? What are you talking about? And so then none of them are your clients, and it was just a hot mess.
But fast forward to today and I bet you they've now circled back, and you've created this undeniably fierce community in Facebook. And
I have clients. I actually have about 4 clients right now that are all multimillionaires, and all of them have dental practices. And I have a client who has the #1 dental practice in Lagos, Nigeria, who has 30 employees. And a client who has one of the #1 practices, implant practices in Georgia, and one has one of the #1 practices in Orlando. And the funny thing about it is, when I think the jumping off point for me is right after I let go and came home, the economy crashed. And because we live in the DMV, and we have access to, I'm in an area that I have access to 2 markets. So I can turn on the news and, Baltimore, I can turn on the news, Washington, DC, totally 2 different ABCs, 2 different teams across the board. And I remember turning on the news one day in 98, and there were about 150, 200, 1,000 people standing in line for a job that was hiring like 4 people. You remember those times?
I do. I was in the line.
Yes, it was just crazy, and everything. You know how the news is; everything is doom and gloom. They're interviewing people, and what makes you think you're going to stand out? And so I sat there that evening, and I wrote a pitch to all of the producers for ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox in both markets. And I said, now more than ever before, it is imperative to learn how to differentiate yourself in the marketplace if you're competing with 1,000 people. When I had been hired, when I moved back to this area from New York City, I had been hired as a publicist for Newsweek.
Right.
And they had a television show, and Newsweek's owned by Washington Post. And not long after I was hired, I was looking through my drawer, and I realized, I counted, there were 100 people that applied for the job that I got.
Wow.
And I would say 70 to 80% of them were probably more qualified than I was.
Wow.
They had traditional PR background, which I didn't. I had an advertising background, and I had the itch, and I started a PR agency on the side, and I started picking up clients, but I had my own PR agency. I had no traditional experience to go in and head a department. But I knew how to strategically position myself. Like, I totally used that to my advantage when I sat in. The fact of the matter is, you're doing this, this is why you need me. So I sat there and I saw 100 people applied. I got the job. And so when I was pitching, to the markets, that was what I was saying. The fact of the matter is, people now more than ever, and this is 98, need to know how to understand what it is that their competitive advantage is, and be able to leverage it in a way that is that differentiates them from everyone else. And so I got a call back from ABC. I was invited on, and they said, you're a natural. Have you ever done this before? I have never done it before. And they invited me to come back every week. It became too much. So then they said, we dialed back, and I went back once a month for an entire year.
Wow. Wow.
So my whole point was, when you were talking about being brave, a lot of times you don't even know what the path is supposed to look like. It's like, ironically, my husband, because he was not at the time excited about this whole venture at all. Like he said, he was very clear. I married somebody from corporate America. I did not marry an entrepreneur. This is not working for me. And I was trying to figure it out. So he said, you have to go get a job. And I don't care what it is. And so I went and got a job at Lazy Boy Furniture.
Nice.
And I actually paid the babysitter more than I made, because I had 2 kids. So I think I made like $14 an hour as part-time or something. and I probably paid her 12 or vice versa. And I would walk around the floor every day while everybody was complaining how they hate their job, writing what my newsletter was going to be, writing what my pitch was going to be. You know, I mean, like I'm strategizing on all this stuff, and I'm exercising. I should have had a Fitbit on, you know, walking the floor. And I would say welcome, and my kids would laugh because I would be like, welcome to Lazy Boy Furniture. And then the next day I would be like, you guys, I'm coming in at 11 because I'm going to be on ABC telling people.
They're like, who is this nutball?
This is how you land a job.
That's awesome.
But it's interesting because there are always so many things that we live in a world that is so easy to curate.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everybody, you only put out the good stuff, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like everybody thinks it's fly from day one. And it's so far from fly. You're, you know, darn near throwing, you know, pictures and, you know, dishes at each other. And he's like, you go back and get a job. And you're like, I'm never going to get a job. I will leave you before I get a job, you know? And then next thing you know,
you're on ABC.
Yeah, you know, and you
weather
certain storms and come out, and now he's like the biggest champion. But, you know, we've been married now 19 years, and I've been an entrepreneur for 10. So it was, he had to recognize, and I recognized that I am not wired for anything else but doing what I do.
Right.
It is what it is. It's a package deal. I just didn't know it when you married me. You know, I didn't know what the package said. I was still deciding.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what's the biggest thing that you see with the women that you're working with now, or even over the last 10 years? What's the biggest thing that you see that is kind of holding them back from fully owning who they are?
Going back to your word about brave is so much. Fear is so real. But beyond that, the whole idea of and I interchangeably use personal branding because it's become so diluted and everyone uses it and you hear it all the time, and it's become white noise for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But most people in their career, we don't learn in school, most people haven't learned how to own and navigate their own success, you know? And so we don't learn the softer skills, you know? You can be a cardiologist. I've had a client who's a doctor from Harvard, you know? I mean, you can have, I've had clients who I've, you know, done workshops everywhere from, you know, teams at the White House who are leaving, you know, administration to, you know, Deloitte. I mean, like, so powerhouse women who have never even considered putting themselves out there. You know, they have been, they've just literally gone through life, checking every box, doing everything right, and following the formula of that they were handed down. That you're going to get recognized, that your time will come, that there's a certain sequence to the way things happen, that you don't go in and demand more because when it's ready, that you will, you know, you'll get it, that kind of thing. And it's frustrating for a lot of people because what happens is we're naturally born to be very allegiant, and we're completely allegiant to these organizations, and we're like, oh my God, I've put everything in there. And then all of a sudden something happens. That something doesn't have to be that you're fired. That something could be somebody who's less talented than you is brought in and they're asking you to train that person. Happens all the time. That something can be that all of a sudden you realize that there's a discrepancy between your paycheck and someone else's. That something can be that we're merging with another organization and now you have to prove your value. And so we've never, you know, a lot of us don't know where to even begin to recognize the importance. And I heard someone years ago, she had it in a book, her name is Sally Hogshead, and she said that the best 401k, you know, you'll ever have is your own personal development. You know, like we don't recognize that. We put everything into our organization, but we're not taking the steps to advance ourselves. And
right.
It is killing us. It is killing our families. It is killing our wallets. It is killing everything because people pay. There's a difference. You have a generalist and you have a specialist. Your generalist is always going to be right here. The specialist can be, you know.
Sky's the limit, right.
What we want to do is we want to recognize how exceptional we are, and it's our job to become our #1 brand ambassador. When I was talking to a girlfriend one time, she came down and she worked for one of the world's largest companies. It's probably one of the top 5 companies. It's a pharmaceutical company. And she was telling me I was complaining about something, and she was trying to remind me who I was. And she was like, Jennifer, you used to be in New York, you used to work here. There's no reason for you to be in a situation where you're not happy. And she was like, you could fly out to Los Angeles, you could work with a client, you can come back. And I'm like, girl, you don't understand. You don't have kids, you don't have this, you don't have that. And she's like, you don't understand. She's like, we have people who come to our organization who say, I'd love to work with you, but I live in Seattle and I'm not going to uproot my kids. And we fly out there and we build them a home office. She's like, we have people who come in here who say, I'd love to work with you, but I have a house in the Hamptons and I don't do the traffic in New York in the city in the summertime. And so I have to work remotely, and we're like, done. Or we have people who come and say, my wife needs a graduate degree. And we say, okay, where do we send the check?
Mm-hmm.
People make exceptions for exceptional people. And when you really start recognizing that, and that's the whole thing, when you recognize how exceptional you are, you're not on pins and needles hoping somebody else sees it. You know, you're not like, oh my God, I hope that, you know, I hope that I get this job. I hope that, well, you realize that you're an asset to that organization, and you raise your requirements of what it is. If I know, you know, it is taking me, I'm 48. It's taken me literally 48 years to unequivocally be able to say that if I'm not on your team, you're at a disadvantage. If you're a professional woman and you're working out there and I'm not a strategist on your team, you straight up are. I'm not saying that things are not great. I'm not saying you're not thriving, but there are so many things that are not even on your radar because you're not designed to think like that. Just like, you know, I'm not designed to think like a dentist or, you know, someone is in this profession, but like really recognizing your value and that you're an asset so you don't have to compromise, but that you start putting yourself in a position to win, to connect with the right people, to get the right opportunities, to raise your hand at the right time, and to let the organization so everyone else knows, you know, what it is and the value that you're bringing.
Wow. That's a lot. So when somebody comes to you, is there like a first thing that you do with them?
We usually start with an audit.
Okay.
You know? And everyone's end game is completely different. There's some
Mm-hmm.
who come who are just wanting to raise their visibility within their organization because they want to take it up to the C-suite, you know? And it could be something as, you know, somebody who's in marketing communication, helping them, you know, get really clear on what it is that they're bringing, how to position themselves, putting a stakeholders communication plan together, making sure that we're connecting with the right people, that their, you know, their contribution, all kinds of things like that. But it also could be someone who comes who is like, you know, which I get a lot of people, I've been in the industry for a long time and I'm ready to raise my visibility out in the industry. And
Right.
so it really is, so many people, women have not been taught to be visible. There's so many people who have been in the game for 15, 20 years and have no presence. You know, they have no picture up on LinkedIn, which is huge. I mean, if you say the majority of people in corporate are on LinkedIn, there's just like a non-negotiable, you know, you can't even get found if someone is looking for someone from their board. I've had clients who hire me simply because they want to be on boards and they make, you know, I mean, $50,000 on, you know, boards or more. And so you cannot even get found if you don't have a digital presence. And it's really a non-negotiable because a lot of times people feel as though that's for the next generation. You know, I've been doing this for so long, and they just take themselves out of the competition. So it really is just having a baseline. Let's see where you are. Let's see how you're showing up. Let's see where the world sees when they're looking at you. And then let's look at where it is you're trying to do. And then, you know, systematically walk back and put together a game plan for doing that. And it's everything. For some people, it is how do we elevate your executive presence? How do we make sure that you're killing it from the stage when you're speaking? How do we elevate the fact that when you're dressed, you're showing up and you actually look like who you are, who you say you are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's across the board. It is your messaging. It is, I mean, it's just everything. So it is very customized.
Right. And then I know another part of your business is you go out and you speak. I know that you've done a lot of workshops. You have clients like Duke Energy, Johns Hopkins University. I saw you were speaking at Microsoft. I mean, Deloitte, like the list goes on, Spelman College. So clearly there's a appetite for this type of information and content that you're able to package up in your workshops and keynotes and things like that. So talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you cover in that.
Appetite to a degree. I still think that it, just like the whole Me Too movement, I still think that it is, we're in the infant stages of women owning their career. I mean, I could speak in a room with hundreds of people, and there's literally a line as soon as I finish, and they're like, "Oh my God, I've never even thought about that. I straight thought you were talking to me," you know, every single time, and every single problem is so radically different, but so the same thing, you know. There's so many women who, I mean, and I use this example a lot when I speak, but I mean, I've spoken at an organization, and it was a multi-billion-dollar organization, and a senior executive pulled me aside and said, "Everything that you said resonated with me. I travel a lot. I'm going to follow up because I definitely want to work with you." She followed up. She followed up. She was like, "I'm in Vegas. I'm here. I'm there." Next thing you know, they lost a $1 billion account. They lost an entire state for their, yes. And so they lost a $1 billion account. And then her boss was let go 2 months later. And then she went from 156 direct reports to 13. And then when she, you know, by the end of the year, she was chuckling. She clearly was an educated woman. She was like, "I clearly know I'm, you know, out the door." And they let her go around Christmas. I met her in February. She had 6 months severance package, really smart woman, spoke about 3 or 4 languages, had worked at top companies. And when she got back, she didn't know where to start. She was literally looking online like Glassdoor.com. And then, you know, what starts to happen is you don't get calls back, because that's usually not how people get jobs anymore. And all of a sudden your self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence starts to tank. By day 45, you're like, "Oh my God, I'll just take anything. You know what, maybe I'll hang up the consultancy thing and do that," you know, and that whole thing. And then you couple that with every time there's a person who has the rug pulled out from under them, the moment they do, someone hears, "Oh, Tracy, I heard that you were in the market. You're a free agent now. Give me a call. Let's go have lunch on Monday. I just heard about something," or "We're looking for someone," you know. There are people without ever even, you know. And so it's the kind of thing that your own insurance is making sure that people know who the heck you are.
Right.
And I use that example all the time because her number one excuse, and I say it all the time, we're so busy building someone else's brand that nobody knows who the heck we are.
Right.
You know, the company is good, but you could not even take a moment out of your entire week starting in February when we met to make sure that you started putting the relationships in place, to make sure that if you had an upcoming conference, you put your hat in the ring so you're getting on the stage so people can start seeing the value that you're bringing, or that you're contributing to the newsletter, whatever the thing is. But I mean, like, that's that whole thing. So when you talk about, I think it's still at an infant stage, because whenever I go speak, 98% of the people have not done that. You know, they're sitting there like, oh my God, you know.
Right.
How do I start? Where do I even begin? You know, I mean, like, so I think that I feel as though it is my job. I feel as though it's my mission just to empower women that to take the reins, you know, just grab the reins and recognize that if you don't, nobody else is going to do it. Like, straight up, that if we look at your calendar, I can always tell what's the most important thing. And chances are, with the majority of your audience and the majority of most people's audience, the majority of my clients, my friends, everyone, we're never on our own calendar. Everyone else's needs are. And if you just thought about in terms of, even if you did one thing each week, one thing a month to start elevating your visibility within your organization or within your industry, one thing a month, an entire year, you would just be blown away.
Yeah, well, and I just want to give a shout out to you, because I worked with you many years ago to put together my one sheet and to start submitting to speak at conferences in my industry. And I'm so incredibly grateful, as uncomfortable as it was, as we were going through you interviewing me and developing the copy for the one sheet, and the way you were positioning me, which was all true, but it wasn't how I saw myself.
Isn't it funny how other people can see us at such a high level, and you're the one who tells the information, and you're like, I did this.
And when it came back, I was so blown away. I was like, well, I can't say this about myself. And you were like, but Tracy, that's true. and now fast forward, not that one sheeter, that signature talk that we worked on has propelled me in ways that I can't even begin to explain to you. The doors that have opened, contacts that I've made, opportunities that have come my way just from taking the time and spending the money to sit with you, to develop the one sheet, to say, okay, I've got to get myself out there on the stage in my industry. And now I have contacts all across the country, in fact, the world, that I would have never gotten if I didn't say yes to working with you. And
But you were already, if I'm not mistaken, weren't you already an adjunct professor?
No.
You weren't at that time?
No, that came after. Mm-mm.
Okay, so how long have we known each other?
I'm saying we're going back at least 9 years, maybe.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow.
That
Our 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, exactly. No, but just to your point is, if I would have said, well, I'm just going to keep grinding it out, riding the hamster wheel 9 to 5, I wouldn't be where I am today without making that decision.
And first of all, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. But it's interesting because you have, I have always found, and you can tell me this because your foot has been in both worlds, there is a different mentality from the entrepreneurial world and from the corporate world. And because you're in both, and education and higher ed, you're like straddle all three. So in the entrepreneurial world, pretty much most people that you meet are open, and their whole thing is about personal development. And, I'm going to work with the next person because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And I'm out here and I have my own money and I got to make sure that I'm making, maximizing everything that I do. So let me find out who the best person is that I can, latch onto or learn from or mentor from or whatever. And then it's a completely different mindset in the corporate world. So it is, that's not necessarily my lane. I need to, this is what I do. I need to stay here and do this. You have very few people. You have traditional, who's your sponsor, who's your mentor kind of thing. But just in general, you don't have a lot of people who are like, boom, I'm staking my claim. I'm about to really get out there. They're like, oh my God, what would my organization say kind of thing.
I would agree, but I think I've been fortunate in the large corporate organizations I've worked in, both nationally, globally. They've been very supportive of personal growth and development, and they've had very large learning and organizational development departments that were fully dedicated to doing all of the really good OD type work. And so I think while I lived in the corporate space and I didn't live in the entrepreneurial space, I think it's because of the organizations I was in were so pro personal growth and development. But I would agree with you that most organizations, whether they're small to medium-sized firms, aren't into that. And I also was identified as a high potential. So I was on the fast track in every organization I was ever in. And so I think that might be the difference.
So yes, and so what I wanted to piggyback off of, I always believe it's hard to, what is it? It's the saying is it's hard to be what you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in an organization and you don't have women who are out there developing themselves personally, outside of the confines of the organization, then you start to feel as though I can't do that.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh my God, I could lose my job for doing that. Like you start having all of these things instead of the reverse of recognizing that there's no reason that you should not do that because it is your guarantee. This is your 401k. And so it doesn't have to mean when you're elevating yourself or you're speaking and you're becoming an industry or you're penning articles or you're saying, over the next year, what I want to do is I'm going to write 2 or 3 articles and put them in our industry publication. Or what I want to do is I'm going to find our local, regional, or national, conference, and I'm going to do a breakout session. Or I'm going to do a round table in my area of expertise and bring 4 or 5 people from different places together and have a conversation. So when you don't see anything like that, you don't have that in your sphere of thought, you don't do that. And what it's doing, it's putting a shackle and it's literally keeping you capped. And so the blessing that you have had is, and how I met you myself, is we met through somebody who was out in the industry whose whole thing was about that. And so when you have so many women who are not doing that, and you don't have that, that person who's 1 or 2 steps above you, it is literally, it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking to go into organizations. I went into, I bring Duke up one time, and this is one of the things that we talked about prior to the call. For 10 years, my company was called Brand ID Strategic Partners. And I had no idea that when I started my agency of personal branding, that it would have anything to do with mindset. I had no idea it would have, I call it internal branding now, anything to do with all the internal stuff or the way someone dressed. I mean, like all these other issues, I had no idea. And so it was just, I thought that you would come to me, I'd help with your messaging, I'd help with your positioning, you know, tap you on the little fanny and send you out into the world. And one year I went to go speak at Duke Energy, and they brought about 80 women from all of the nuclear plants and to this site for the day. And I did a workshop, and I think I was like 4 or 5 hours. I was on stage, and then we actually went in and they, you know, did work. And afterwards, a couple of the women hired me. And we're talking about like nuclear physicist kind of women. And one after the other, what I would always say to a client, and I still do, is what needs to happen, 1, 2, 3 things that need to happen between now and the time we finish to make you feel as though this was like an amazing investment, like you totally got what you were looking for. And every single person said, I need to work on my self-confidence and self-worth. Had nothing to do with personal branding. I'm like, oh my God. But what I started to recognize was that I could give you every single skill set, but if you didn't feel confident enough, if you didn't look in the mirror and actually see an industry rock star, if you didn't feel like you were talking about when we were having that conversation, that you're telling me who you are, I'm, you know, putting it down and you're like, oh my God, that seems too big. This person seems like she is undeniably fierce. And I knew I was doing my thing, but I'm not doing it like that. Oh my God, like who are people going to think that I am if I walk out here and say I'm, you know, this brave badass like I am? So,
well, I was stepping off the corporate jet, which I was, but I don't want anybody to know that.
And so that's what happens. And so I didn't recognize that. And that is hence why I ended up realizing that it was more of a, you know, personal elevation. It is, how do we take you from right here and elevate all aspects of you, elevate everything, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I just gave a workshop, and I was telling them that you have to know where you are at point A, you have to know where you want to be at point B, but really it's the messy middle that you got to work stuff out, right? Like who are you trying to become? But be realistic about, confront the brutal facts about where you are, right? And it's okay. You don't have to feel shame about where you are. And we were talking about leadership. You know, you may be in leadership, you aspire to a higher level of leadership, but you got to work through all of that mindset stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never ending. They say new level, new devil.
Mm-hmm.
But it is absolutely something that you have to comb and start shifting the way that you see yourself. I did a manifesto. And I don't have it in front of me, but I wrote it because so many of the women that I had, I think I might have it on my laptop. I'll read it in a second. But I was getting so many women who did not see. They just could not see how like fly they were. And what I did was I wrote this thing so that women would from now on recognize when they looked in the mirror, you know, what they were bringing to the table. And I think that it's harmed us tremendously. To have this heck of an education, to have all these skills, to have, you know, all of this that we're bringing to the table, and we have fogs on our glasses and we can't see it, you know? And we need to shift that.
We do. And I think the time is now. I think a lot more of us are more fully awake, more fully conscious. And I think I think we owe it to the world to really develop that self-confidence and self-worth and really shine a light and share our gifts.
I agree. You there?
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah.
So did you find your manifesto?
I'll send it over to you for the show notes.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So we'll share your manifesto in the show notes.
It really is something that people have started putting it on their screensaver. But it's just a reminder. It's like something like, I am undeniably fierce. There's nobody on the planet who has the skills, the mixture of skills and talent and expertise and the background and the education and, you know, the successes and failures that I have in every project or team or organization that I work with. I am an asset. It's just really breaking down to people so they recognize that their uniqueness and what it is, how much of a gift it is, so that they're able to leverage that. And what we need is, for women, when you're talking about being brave, we need to start seeing that. And most people don't ever take the time to really look at that. You're going through life, and unless you're looking for a job, when was the last time that you really sat down and bullet pointed all the things that you were just so dope about? Like, seriously, you know what? I did this. This person called me. I made a difference in this person's life. I volunteered here. I did this. I bought this house. I, flew over here solo and did an expedition. Like, when was the last time that you really took a totality of who you really were? And if you have, are you doing it on a regular basis? Because that's what you need to be bringing to the table.
Yes.
And that's when you don't let people diminish what your worth is, because
right.
You're not just hiring me because I know this job. You're hiring me because in the 48 years, I've birthed 3 kids. I've done this, I've done that. And there's nobody else that you can bring in that has the mixture of what I have that's about to help you the way I can. Like, there's
right.
Boom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Boom. So my finale question is always, what's the bravest thing that you ever did, and how does it inspire you today?
So in 1997, I was working at an agency in Maryland, had relocated from Los Angeles, and my intention had been to live in New York, but I didn't get the job in New York. I got a job in Bethesda, Maryland. And I was walking across the living room one day, and it hit me, there's no reason you're not in New York. You're not married. You don't have a social life. The only thing you have going for you is you're hanging out at the bookstore on Friday night, working at the agency during the day. And so I went in and put my 30-day notice in, and I packed my dog in the car I had a week vacation first, but I put my notice in at the same time. And I drove to New York, and it was a big deal because I'm not a driver. Well, I wasn't then, but I'm really not. I don't do long distance driving. I'm a person who falls asleep. And so I drove to New York and took my oversized portfolio out and hit every single recruiter and agency I could. And at the end of 1 week, I had 5 offers. And I sat back and decided the offer that I was going to take, and came back home and, finished working and closed out shop. But it was literally, I was walking across the living room and it said, there's no reason to be here. There's no reason not to go for it. And, it's funny how you tell the story and it sounds great. And it was, like tremendously tumultuous, and I was lost, and I was standing on the, rail was my thing, and the agency couldn't meet with me now, and I'm crying, and I'm calling my, boyfriend at the time, who ended up becoming my husband. I don't know if this was a good idea, and oh my God. But yes, it resulted in 5 job offers by the end of the week.
Wow. But you were probably terrified because you could have gotten 0 job offers.
I was extremely terrified. I mean, it was nothing. I mean, like I felt I was straight up free falling, but it just was, that when you have that still small voice, you cannot escape it. Everything can look great on the outside, but if you have something that's gnawing at you and it does not go away, it just keeps on coming back. Why are you sitting here? Why are you here? And so that's what happened. And I ended up moving to New York. And of course, that was where it changed the trajectory, because that's where I read the article on branding, and it literally just changed everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I'm so glad you did, because it led you to your agency of today, which then I met you through kind of mutual like-minded women. So, and here you are, and you're continuing to inspire, motivate women, and really get them out there. And I salute you for the work that you're doing out in the world. And, you're truly extremely gifted as a writer, as a speaker. I've seen you speak, and, I'm just so grateful that our paths have crossed, and that you're doing the work that you are, and really touching the lives that you're touching, because I think it's important work that needs to be done right now.
Thank you. And I just want to take a moment and salute you. And it's blowing my mind on how long we've known each other. And the thing about, one thing that is great about social media is that you can stay in touch with people and follow them, even if you're not necessarily in their face or their physical presence all the time. And so we have not physically been together, I guess, for lunch or dinner in several years. But, you know, it's like, you know, I love watching boss women, just the evolution, next level. And all of that, the thread is bravery. It's making that decision. And for you to make the decision to go on the quest. I remember when you went to New York, and I remember just your whole thing, you know, you found someone, you're like, okay, I'm going all in, and, you know, and all the things that have been happening with you, and you going and teaching, and you just giving back, and you getting fantastic opportunities to work in wonderful places with great people who recognized your talent. And all along, you still doing the thing that you love to do. And I think that it speaks highly of your character, and it speaks highly of just who you are, to be someone who is like, I'm not going to do the journey by myself. I'm going to open up the kimono and bring other people along with me, and change their lives in the process. So, you know, here's to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Brave Girls with Tracey M. as much as I did creating it. Each show is produced with you, the listener, in mind, as you look for inspiration and motivation from other brave souls as you pursue your desires. I'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave me a review on iTunes. I read every one. And check out my website, tracym.com, for more free resources. You can also join my list and sign up for my newsletter right from the homepage. Until next time, stay strong, believe in your dreams, and go do something brave.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of Brave Girls with Tracey M. and hope that you enjoyed the show. For more information about today's episode, as well as additional free resources to help you achieve greatness in your life, visit tracym.com and sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, dream big, believe in yourself, and let your brilliance shine as only you can do.